It's my pleasure to introduce Basil Camu. Basil is a master arborist, author, and co founder of Leaf and Limb, a tree care company based in Raleigh, North Carolina, and Project Pando, a nonprofit focused on reconnecting people with trees. Basil's work challenges how we manage suburban and urban landscapes and invites us to work with natural systems instead of against them. His book, From Wasteland to Wonder, offers practical, accessible ways to care for trees, soil, and living landscapes while saving time, money, and effort. His work has been featured in outlets like the New York Times and Gardenista, and he is a frequent speaker for garden clubs, nonprofits, and conservation groups across the country. We're excited to welcome Basil Camu to share how small shifts in how we care for land can help heal the places we live.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a great honor to be here. I love wild ones. I've been a fan for a long time, and I appreciate everybody giving me your time today. Thank you so much. And thank you also for that kind introduction. I always like to start with just a little bit of a story. When I first got into the tree service business almost 20 years ago, I really didn't know much about trees, and we used to make most of our money cutting down trees. It's one of the unfortunate realities of our industry. But over time, I fell in love with trees, I fell in love with soil, fell in love with flowers, and we decided in 2020 that we would actually get out of tree removals. We completely exited that sector, and it has been one of the best decisions we ever made because now we can focus our attention fully on caring for trees, and we've also learned a bunch of new fun stuff, which we'll talk about today, like planting native meadows. Let me tell you a little bit about what we'll be discussing today. So first, I want to give you a little bit of background on basic ecology. Some things you'll know, but I'll add some fun twists. Then I want to talk a little bit about the environmental issues we're facing. Again, things you probably know, but I'd like to add some twists. We need these things because they provide the foundation for the heart of this presentation. The heart of this presentation is a how-to. These are actually things you can do where you live that will help heal Earth, and they'll also help save time and money. I also like to note that everything we're talking about today is based on 20 years of being in the field and working with clients and different stakeholders and HOAs. So I hope to bring you some new perspective and some new things that maybe you haven't heard before. I'll also add one more layer. Everything we're talking about today is in my book, and I'm giving away my book for free because I really want the information to be out there. I want people to be able to use it readily. I want to reduce the roadblocks. You can download the PDF for free from our website. All right, let's dive in. Let's zip back all the way to 350 million years ago, where planet Earth would have probably looked something like this. There was a whole bunch of rocks on land, and whenever it rained, the water would rush across those rocks and wash out to sea. There was no mechanism by which water actually stayed on the land. Over time, we had this amazing thing happen. You can see here on the rocks this organism called lichen. Lichen is a partnership between fungi and bacteria. On the one part of the team, the fungi, they're very good at extracting minerals from rocks. That's what they do. They spit acid onto the rock and they extract minerals. They're also very good at finding water in hard to reach places. The other part of this team was bacteria. Bacteria have a different set of superpowers. They can harness energy from the sun and turn it into something usable. Quite incredible. This essentially forms the foundation for what we know as plants today, and we're going to circle back around to this later. Over time, lichen ate rocks, still their favorite food, and as they lived and died, there was an accumulation of what we would call organic matter, these dead lichen bodies. And these started to hold a little bit of water and now a little bit of minerals in the pools of water. And suddenly plants begin evolving and we get glassworts and liverworts and all kinds of amazing things until fast forward till today, and we see a very different ecosystem on land. It looks a lot like this. Plants were driving that transformation. You'll notice here that we have something called soil. Soil is very important. The difference between soil and dirt is life. Dirt is what we would have seen here. Life in soil is what we see here. That's very important. It's a very important distinction. It sets the groundwork for how we should care for soil. This is a very close-up view of what healthy soil looks like. You can see all those fungi threaded through this matrix. It almost looks like a sponge, and it really is. Soil in many ways is a sponge. That's very important because now a sponge will hold water. So whereas way back in the day, water rushed out into the oceans, now our soil sponge can hold that water in place, and it's very important. That water is what helps terrestrial ecosystems thrive and survive and produces life. Life now flourishes. And carbon is essential to life. Carbon gets a bad rap because of the focus on atmospheric carbon dioxide. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today, but I just want to establish this idea that really carbon is very important. It's very amazing. I always think of carbon as this Lego set. I used to play with Legos when I was a kid, and now my own kids play with Legos. And really, this is carbon. You can build really amazing things with these carbon building blocks. Carbon is the backbone for everything in our ecosystems. Unfortunately, everything we just discussed is falling apart, and it's due in large part to our activities. Over half of all forests and grasslands have been cut down, and that's in the last 10,000 years. We know that these plants are the backbone for our ecosystem, so we're crippling their ability to feed soil and build soil and hold water. When the forests and the grasslands are cleared away, guess what? Soil dies. It turns back into dirt, and dirt can't hold water. Unfortunately, we have destroyed half of all soil on planet Earth. There are some really remarkable studies and histories in this regard, but I'll just give you one that blows my mind. In the 1900s, we farmed over 1 billion acres into deserts, and those deserts have been completely abandoned. And that's only in the 1900s. This has been going on for a very long time. The Gobi Desert in China used to be lush farmland. The Sahara used to be lush farmland. When we have dirt, it can't hold water. If we can't hold water, guess what? It rushes down into the rivers and rushes back out in the oceans. It does not percolate into the ground. NASA monitors all of our major aquifers across planet Earth, and there's 40 of them. And of those 40 aquifers, 20 are running out of water faster than they can be replenished. To me, this is terrifying. I know there's a lot of talk about oil running out. I cannot imagine water running out. Near and dear to all of our hearts are birds and insects and animals and reptiles. Just in the last 40 years, most of our lifetimes, in our lifetime, we have killed 60% of all birds, insects, animals, reptiles, you name it, fish, they're gone. And then we get to CO2. At this point, you probably see that there's a lot more to this issue than simply CO2 in the atmosphere. It's because we've been killing ecosystems. Trees are what actually pull the carbon down and they pump it into the soil. They feed it to life. The leaf holds carbon and it feeds caterpillars, which now have carbon, which feeds a bird, which has carbon, and so on and so forth. Well, when we kill these forests and kill these grasslands and soil turns back into dirt and animals are dying, well, guess what? That carbon has to go somewhere. It goes back in the atmosphere where it started. So in many ways, we're essentially rewinding time back to the Carboniferous period. And I'll hit you with the low point here. This is the absolute low point of our presentation. And I assure you, it's all hope and change from here because there are things we can do. We can actually work with these natural ecosystems that we've just described. And by changing how we manage trees and changing how we manage land, we actually help heal Earth, help rebuild these systems. And I always like to add, we save time and money. This is worth it on so many levels. So next, I'd like to go through first 5 really easy ways to help heal Earth. And then I'm going to offer a couple of other little more complicated approaches, but still not terribly complicated. So let's dive in. Well, We know now that plants are the backbone of healthy ecosystems. These terrestrial ecosystems have to have plants in play or nothing else works. Without plants, there's no soil. Without soil, there's no water. Without water, soil, and plants, there's a bunch of carbon in the sky. So this is the lever of change. It's plants. It stands to reason, and call me biased, but I love trees. We need to get a lot more trees in the ground. I'm not going to spend any time describing what native means because I'm quite certain all of you know what native means. However, I do want to share something interesting, a slightly different perspective on what native means. So let's look at the Japanese maple. It's a tree that's very beautiful, and it's a highly prized tree in the landscape. Well, that tree was brought over from ecosystems in Japan and Taiwan and China. And in our ecosystem, that tree will only feed maybe 10 insects. So if our local caterpillars are on a Japanese maple and they try to eat a leaf, guess what? They're going to get hurt. They might even die because trees don't want to get eaten. They have all kinds of defenses. They have toxins and chemicals and all kinds of things they use to defend themselves. This is true for all life on Earth. One rule we can all agree on, we don't want to be eaten. Trees are the same. They don't want to be eaten, so they have defenses. It takes insects a very long time to break through those defenses. If, on the other hand, we look at, say, a white oak, which is native to where I live, then we know from Doug Tallamy's work and lots of other great studies that these trees will feed thousands of insects. That's great. It means more life happening from that oak tree. And also, it's good for bringing carbon down out of the atmosphere. It means we're pumping more carbon into the caterpillars and the birds and the soil. Just all around a fantastic thing. It's good for life. It's good for the health of our ecosystem. So let's get more native trees in the ground. And let me throw in one more twist. I recommend saplings. Saplings are the best. Let me first show you what a sapling looks like. This is a young sapling. They're typically going to be a 1 to 3-year-old tree. Sometimes they'll have lovely soil like this, or sometimes it might just be a bare root. Either way, what I love about saplings is they're very easy to plant. I can plant 40 per hour. When I started off, I could do 20 per hour. That's a lot. It takes me about an hour to do one of those normal, big, containerized trees that I would have bought from the nursery some years ago. So I love that I can put 40 trees in the ground instead of one tree in the ground in an hour. Also, with native saplings, we have much healthier root structures. The problem with containerized trees and the problem with balled and burlap trees is they have mutilated root systems and often will die within a decade. This is one of the reasons why trees in the suburban landscape live an average of 35 years. That is just pitiful. If you know much about trees, you know that in the wild, pines will live 500 to 700 years. Same for maples. Oaks aren't even considered mature until they hit 300 years old. And there are oaks in the UK that are well over 1,000 years. So if we're getting an average of 35 years from our suburban trees, we are really missing the mark. That is wasted efforts. It's wasted money. We're missing an opportunity to feed life. Mature trees do a lot more for feeding life and building soil. So if we want to go the easy path, get more trees in the ground, have healthier trees that live a longer time, well, let's use saplings. And with saplings, you get a lot better access to native species because nurseries can actually mail these to you. They put them in a bag, they put a damp washcloth in there, and they can mail them. It's really phenomenal. I know what you're thinking. It's a sapling, it's young, it's frail. I hear you, and we've worked a lot with saplings, and in some cases they do need a little bit of protection. So maybe you need to put a tomato fence around it, or you can build a cage. It's not hard to do. Even if that's the case, it's still worth it. You're still spending less money, you're still spending less effort, and you're getting this healthier tree that lives a longer life. So, needless to say, I'm a big fan of planting native trees, and I'm a bigger fan of planting young saplings. I exclusively work with these now. Here's another young sapling. We grew these from seed, which we're going to talk about later. All right, another big opportunity for a win. I think it was Benjamin Franklin who may have said, a tree earned is a tree saved. And I'm a big fan of that idea. I think one of the easiest things we can do is save the trees we have. There's so much removal happening based on fear and myths. I know this from experience. We do tens of thousands of meetings with clients every year. I've got a lot of evidence from my own experience and from my team's experience, enough to say that approximately 90% of trees that people think need to be removed do not actually need to be removed. I'll give you just two quick examples. People often will call us and say, "Oh man, this big oak, it's so scary. It's near my house. It's going to fall." Well, guess what? The big oak is the one that survived all the storms. It's been through it all. If that is actually the safest tree in your yard, assuming there hasn't been any construction or something like that. Another one we hear a lot, that tree is moving around. It's scary. It's going to fall on my house. Well, trees have to move. That's how they actually get stronger. It's kind of like a human. We need to go exercise. We build muscle, right? We get healthier. Well, trees aren't humans, obviously, but similar mechanism. Movement is actually very healthy for them. Also, let's not forget, tree removal is really expensive. I mean, it's normal to have a $3,000 price tag for a medium-sized tree. If that tree doesn't have to be removed, if it's not presenting any real danger, well, pocket that $3,000, keep the tree, and wonderful, you've just done your local ecosystem a great service. These mature trees provide exponentially more benefits to our ecosystem. It has to do with the quadratic formula, and I'm not going to get into that, but just think about as you blow up a balloon, how the balloon increases its area. It's a quadratic formula. So this is why mature trees are exponentially better than young trees. Also, if we start zooming in on every parts of the tree, looking at this oak here, this is an oak here in Raleigh. We can zoom in on there are ecosystems within ecosystems. You see that moss there growing on the tops of the branches. Well, if you've read Robin Wall Kimmerer's book about moss, you know how rich those ecosystems. They're entire little mini forests. So we have mini forests within this tree, and we have vast ecosystems underground. It's really remarkable, honestly. We talked about the big ones. They're usually the safest trees. Now, I do want to make note, if you've had a contractor digging in the root zone and you've cut a bunch of important roots away, that could be a problem. I have some really detailed guidance about how to navigate that space in my book. I'd recommend downloading the PDF if that's something you want to look at. I'll also note that we do a hard copy of the book because it's intended to be used outdoors, and we sell that at cost. And it's a really high quality production meant to be used. We are a hands-on organization. I'm a hands-on person. I like to get out there and do things. This is another one we hear a lot, hollows. The truth is most hollows are not a thing to worry about. As a matter of fact, there's good research showing that way back in the day in North America, it would have been the hollow trees where bears hibernated and things like that. It's pretty normal for trees to hollow out. Really, the rule of thumb is you have to think about trees like a soda can. You can stand on a soda can, but if you're standing on the soda can and you ask your friend to poke their finger into the soda can, it'll crumple. So when we're thinking about hollows, we're really only looking at what's being affected on the outside of the tree. And the general rule of thumb is that if there's more than 1/3 of the outside of the tree, so this is the trunk, the circumference of the trunk, more than 1/3, and we probably need to call an expert. Less than 1/3, both of these are examples of that, we're probably okay. I can't say this is always true because I don't know every single specific situation. These are just general rules of thumb. Also, sorry, let me show you here. This tree on the right, if you look around the edges, there's something called response growth, and I'm zooming in here, so we've just zoomed in. That's response growth. So when you do have a hollow or if you see this response growth, that's a really good sign. It means the tree's probably healing. Give it enough time and it might actually close the hollow altogether. We hear this one a lot too. The tree's near my house. It's scary. It's going to fall. Well, it's a bit counterintuitive also. If one of these big trees were to fall on that house, it's a fairly gentle situation. They usually, a live tree near a house is leafy and springy. If it lands on a roof, usually the worst that's going to happen is poke a hole through the ceiling. The mistake is to clear around your house and then have trees that are further away such that when they fall, they actually have momentum. That's something that insurance companies often ask for. It actually makes the situation more dangerous. I will do a quick diversion onto one thing that's happening right now out there, and that is a lot of insurance companies are sending drones over houses, and they're sending letters to homeowners requiring them to prune all of the branches off from over top of the roof. big mistake. That will actually make the tree more dangerous. We're going to talk about that when we do structural pruning. And I would encourage you that if you get a letter like that, call a reputable local arborist and have them write a certified letter explaining to the insurance company why this is going to actually make it more dangerous. And usually you can get that request withdrawn. Okay, but there are some times when trees do fall. So here's a great example. Here's a construction site. That orange fencing is much too close to those trees. Those contractors, when they did the foundation and they dug out around the trees, they actually destroyed very important structural roots. In this situation, we have a problem. These trees are actually dangerous. My best advice is if you know construction is happening, get a professional involved early before the project starts. These things can be avoided. Again, I'm not going to go into this level of detail in this presentation. I'd encourage you to check out, I've got a whole chapter in the book that talks about this, and this could be very important to saving trees on your property or nearby. And I always like to say and remind people that just because you have a dead tree doesn't mean you need to remove it. As a matter of fact, when a tree dies, a whole new life begins. It's really remarkable. So if the tree isn't causing a threat or a hazard and you're not worried about it falling, maybe it's in a natural area like this one, please leave it. The migrating birds need it, the bats need it, beetles need it. This is another ecosystem. Number 3, easy ways we can help heal Earth in the suburban landscape. And I realize I'm very tree-centric right now. Don't worry, I'm going to get into other systems. My background is tree-related, so a lot of the ways my lens into this work is via trees. I would also argue that for most, well, I can't speak too broadly, but I'll just say this. In many ecosystems, trees are your big, heavy hitter in terms of healing land, building soil, feeding birds, etc. So I want to talk about pruning a little bit. There are literally billions of dollars spent every year on pruning, and it's so much pruning that happens in the suburban landscape. I'm going to tell you right now that almost every form of pruning is either a waste of money or you're actively paying to kill the tree. There's really only one pruning that actually matters, and it's called structural pruning. And what a structural pruning aims to do is make a tree stronger in the face of a storm. To illustrate this point, I always like to first take you into the forest. Let's imagine right now that we're walking through the forest. And if you've been on a walk through the forest recently, you know that when trees are growing together in a community, which is their original habitat, they grow straight and tall. And that's because they're competing for sunlight. In order to grow and reach that sunlight, they have to grow up straight and tall. They can't waste time growing extra trunks and long branches. That doesn't happen in the forest. That only happens in the suburban landscape where there's too much sunlight. Trees develop multiple trunks and they have these big branches that go off to the side, and that's just not normal. So part of what we can do is we can help correct that. I want to show you a really cool example. So this is what a tree will do if left to its own devices in the suburban landscape. This is a live oak, grew by itself. You can see it has these very large spread out branches. That is not normal for a live oak. When you find a live oak in the forest, it does not look like this. I've seen live oaks growing in the forest. They have single trunks. Here's a great example. I was able to get an actual side-by-side comparison here. This is a red maple. On the left, we have a red maple growing in a forest, and on the right, we have that same red maple growing in the suburban landscape. The differences are stark. That tree on the left, that is optimally designed to withstand storms. The tree on the right, not so much. As a matter of fact, after taking that photo, that tree did split in a storm. And guess what? It caused damage to a car. So there's a lot of reasons why we don't want that tree on the right. We want the tree on the left. The tree on the left is still alive and thriving, so it means trees live longer. Also, selfishly, it means we don't have to worry so much about tree branches splitting onto our cars and houses. So again, we save time and money. Plus, if we're going to spend money on pruning, why not spend money on pruning that actually helps enhance the longevity of the tree versus just throwing it away, or worse, maybe actually causing damage? More on that next. I want to quickly say that I'm not going to get into the details of how to do structural pruning, but if you go to my book, I've got written instructions, and I'll also note that in the book, we do something called QR codes. So you can actually use your phone to scan the QR code and watch videos. If you're looking at the PDF, you can just click the link and watch videos. So the book includes how-to videos, which I actually prefer. I think they're just easier to learn that way. I mentioned that in some cases, you might actually be paying somebody to kill your tree. And it's really unfortunate because trees take a long time to show this. But when this thing happens right here, good pruning cut on the left, we left this special place called the branch collar. Branch collars are what help heal a tree. On the right, branch collar is gone. It's not going to heal. I'll show you an example. Check this out. Oak on the left, oak on the right. On the left, you see these 3 white spots. These were excellent pruning cuts that healed over time. On the right, poor pruning cut. It took the whole branch collar off. Guess what? Now there's a hollow there. This may not end up being a problem. Perhaps it heals in the very long run, but I will tell you, speaking from experience, a lot of times trees cannot recover from poor pruning cuts. And sometimes those hollows turn into big decay that spreads around the whole tree, and then it does fall or it has to be removed. So I always encourage people, don't pay people to kill your trees. And if you're going to pay people to prune, pay them to make your tree stronger. Great way to save time and money. I want to show you this. This is really fun. I just always like this. There's a tree I've been watching in a park near my house, and I like to take photos throughout time. So this is a big cut that was made in September of 2018. It's a 12-inch pruning cut, which I got to say is too big. I always encourage people, make small cuts. You can read more about this in my book, but small cuts are ones that can heal. I do think this one's going to heal, though. You can see this progression. This is the response growth I was talking about. I'm hopeful it will heal. But what I like to show here is you can see all the way on the right, December 2025. It's 7 years later. We still have a ways to go. And now look at that decay is really showing up. So now it's a race between the response growth, the healing wood, and the decaying wood. And I'm fingers crossed, I'm hoping it'll close up before it's too late. Okay, if we're talking about trees, and we've been talking about planting trees, we've been talking about keeping trees, we've been talking about making them stronger through pruning, then the last thing we have to talk about is how do you make a tree healthy? Because strength and health are very different things. Health comes from soil. Trees have to have a healthy ecosystem in the soil in order to have a healthy ecosystem above ground. Do you remember all the way back at the presentation start where I showed this lichen? That was the very beginning of this relationship between fungi and bacteria. Trees and soil today are the advanced version of that. The bacteria portion is now more, I'm oversimplifying, so bear with me, but more or less you've got your part of the organism above ground that receives sunlight and turns it into energy, and it also pulls carbon from the sky. And then we have this below ground portion where the roots interface with fungi, and the fungi are what extract nutrients from the dirt, sand, silt, and clay. The other part, fungi, they play a role in collecting water, so they can reach water where the roots cannot reach water. So we have this same system. It just looks a little different now. We really need that fungi underground to have a healthy ecosystem. It doesn't work without it. And just a fun fact, some science suggests that trees actually developed roots specifically to interface with fungi. And it makes total sense based on the evolutionary track. That's a fun aside. I want to focus on how to build healthy soil. So very easy ways to build healthy soil. Number one, leave leaves. People often think leaving leaves means you have to leave them exactly where they fall on your property. No, that's not the case. The idea is to leave them on your property. Don't send them to curbside collection. Leave them. Lots and lots and lots of nutrients. And it's not crazy, right? Let's go back to that same forest we were talking about earlier. Imagine we're back in the forest. What's under your feet? It's lots of leaves and it's lots of rotting sticks. This is normal tree ecosystem. They need these. So save yourself a load of time on raking and blowing, and instead let those leaves rot under your tree. It's free fertilizer, and there are entire ecosystems that need these leaves. So now you've got another ecosystem on your property. Next, skip the fertilizers. Frankly, skip all the chemicals. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But really, fertilizers, if you're buying it from a service provider or you're buying it from a Lowe's or you're buying it from a hardware store, it is not what you should be using. Compost is all you need. If you're buying compost, great. If you're making your own compost, even better. And y'all, I'm here to say making compost is very easy if you want it to be. We'll talk about that shortly. Compost, if you're going to fertilize, quote unquote, fertilize, use a compost. Save time and money. I love showing this illustration. So this is the same tree, 1 year apart. We're in a classic suburban setting here. On the left, it's dying, barely surviving. We came in and infused the area around the tree and in the root zone with compost. And look at this, 1 year later, look at that tree. And this is even despite that. If you look around the tree, you can see there's manicured grass. So there's still all kinds of problems happening here. But the fact that it recovered in a year with compost is just remarkable. It's not crazy. Compost is essentially just rotting stuff. So it helps build that life in the soil. And then finally, mulching. Mulching occupies a lot of time within the suburban landscape. I'm here to say that really, if you're going to mulch, not a bad idea, but use arborist wood chips. These are the things you get for free from a tree service. Every tree service has to do something with their wood chips. We call these arborist wood chips. They'll give them away for free. This is a great use of an existing waste stream. And I could actually do an entire hour-long presentation on why arborist wood chips are so amazing. I'll skip that for now. Just here to say this is the way to go, and they're free. This is why we do not recommend using any kind of processed mulches, your triple shreds, your double shreds, all this stuff, because they do this. They become waterproof. And that is the opposite of what we want from our mulch. We do not want it to repel water. We want it to soak up water. So avoid this. And if you live in a community where you have to have this, then you want to turn it every 3 to 6 months. There's a tool called the potato hoe that I really like. And you can turn these mulches with a potato hoe, but you could also use a rake. Finally, I always have to mention this. This is something called a mulch volcano, and you've probably seen it. This kills trees. Trees their trunks are not designed to stay buried under mulch. It's just not how, if you again walk out in the forest, do you see this? No way. That's not how trees grow. What this mulch does is it actually kills the tree because it rots the trunk and it does all kinds of other crazy things that result in early death. This is what it should look like. I want to point out to you at the base of this trunk, we see this nice flare here. That's perfect. That means the part of the tree that's supposed to be above ground and dry is above ground and dry. And the roots, which stay underground and stay wet, well, they're underground and they're wet. That's perfect. I also love that they expanded these wood chips all the way out to the edges of the tree. That's fantastic. I think it's just, that's how it should be. The only complaint I have about this scenario is I'd really love to see some native shrubs and smaller trees underneath this oak. If you've read Doug Tallamy's work, and I know you have, then you know that many insects need to finish their life cycles on plants located under the canopy. I also like putting plants under the canopy because it means I don't have to go into that bed and do any kind of management. If there are trees and shrubs growing in here, well, guess what? You don't have to pull weeds. You don't have to replenish mulch. Nothing has to be done. This area starts to take care of itself. So again, I'm kind of lazy at my core. Save time, save money. All right, last in this category of 5 really easy ways, things you can do today help heal Earth. Promote an outrageous diversity of life. I love this term. This comes from Michael Phillips, his book, Mycorrhizal Planet, which I love, but an outrageous diversity of life. That means you need lots of ecosystems on your property. You need the leaf duff. That's an ecosystem. Trees, shrubs, those are ecosystems. All kinds of great things. Let me show you some more. A brush pile. This is the back of my yard. I have this fun little game where I try to keep every shred of carbon on my property, whether it comes from the kitchen or it comes from my yard, it's going to this back corner. All my food gets thrown right here on these 2 blue pallets. You know, I mentioned earlier composting is easy. Literally what I have done is taken 2 pallets, put them on their ends, I bolted them together, and I just throw all my food scraps in there. It rots. You don't have to turn it. You don't have to do anything. You just walk away. You come back in a year and you have beautiful compost. I also throw all my brush back here. This is a whole other ecosystem. Underneath all this brush, you'll see a bunch of logs. Logs are another ecosystem. The beetles love logs. And if you have a yard full of beetles, well, you've got a whole patrol of organisms that are out eating aphids and whiteflies and eating weed seeds and just doing all kinds of pollination. It's just a fantastic thing. We want outrageous diversity. Also, I got to say, I like this because I don't have to bag it up and don't have to put it on the curb and don't none of that. Just throw it in the corner of your yard. And if you live in a place where people will be upset with you, here's a little trick that we're going to talk about with native meadows later. Put up an educational sign. You can turn a brush pile from a quote unquote eyesore to this thing that people are interested to learn about by simply putting up an educational sign. Signs are game changers. Light pollution. This is a real photo from space. This shows the extent of the light pollution happening around the US. It is severe, and this badly disrupts insects and birds. We have moths circling around lights. We have mayflies laying eggs on pavement thinking it's a river. It's just, the stories are endless and they're all really sad. This is part of the reason why when you drive, you don't have bug splatter on your windshields anymore. I know y'all remember the 90s and the 80s. Back then, you drive around, you're getting bug splatter. If you're driving to the coast or you're going on vacation, you're getting bug splatter. It almost is non-existent now. And indeed, insects are disappearing. This is part of it. So get your lights on a sensor that saves electricity. Petition your city to turn off those downtown skylines. Why are we burning all that electricity for no reason? And guess what? With less lights, we can actually see the stars again. Mosquito sprays. I had to designate a slide just for this one. I think y'all know the story on mosquito sprays. They are a total waste of time and they cause massive destruction. They're neurotoxins. And when that mosquito spray company comes up to you and says, oh, yeah, it's an all natural product. Yes, they're right. It is an all natural product. Pyrethrins are all natural, but so is asbestos. Doesn't mean it's safe. All natural does not mean safe. It's just a marketing gimmick. Don't buy it. And all you're doing is you're harming yourself, you're harming your loved ones, you're harming your pests, and you're destroying life on the property. And guess what happens? When all those predators are gone, the ladybirds and all the things that keep mosquitoes in check, well, the mosquitoes bounce back fast, and now they're worse than ever. I could do another hour on this slide. I'm going to skip it. Actually, almost any slide in this presentation I could probably do an hour on. We always have to mention the kitties. Kitties are great. I like cats, but they must stay inside. Outside, they're an ecological disaster. Bells don't work. None of it works. Got to keep them inside. Billions of birds and small mammals are killed by feral cats. I did not mention invasive removal on this deck because it's not easy. It's very complicated, but I do always like to mention that another great way to help boost the health of your ecosystem is through invasive removal. But unfortunately, it doesn't make the cut for easy, so I've left it off. And instead, I'd like to pivot now to two different systems. These are a little more complicated, but they're more powerful. And for those of you who work with land or at scale, you're working with a whole yard or a whole community, or you're working with a municipality, these are really worth knowing about. Speaking of municipalities, many cities have thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of acres of mowed space. Here where I live in Wake County, we have 127,000 acres of grass that is mowed. This is the municipal level that they mow every single year. What I'm going to introduce you to is ways we can fill all 127,000 acres with a system that's incredible, and it's not hard to do. Let's dive in. Well, lawns are a special thing. I'm sure you know a lot of the facts, but I'll throw a few at you. Currently, it is the #1 crop grown in America. Grass is the #1 crop ahead of corn, ahead of soybeans, ahead of all other crops, and it does not produce any food. If you took all the grass in the United States and you smushed it together, it would be the size of the state of Georgia. We use 1/3 of all publicly available water in the United States to irrigate lawns. We use close to 1 billion tons of fertilizers on these lawns every year. Creating fertilizer has a massive energy requirement, huge carbon footprint. Then you have to transport the fertilizers. Then we spray them on the yards, and guess what? It doesn't do anything. We know this now from basic ecosystems. Ecosystems don't need fertilizers. As a matter of fact, fertilizers get in the way. They cause damage. They harm that relationship between plants and fungi. And then guess what? They run off. They go down in the streams. They wash out in the rivers. We have a dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico that is the size of the state of Maryland. And that is thanks to fertilizer runoff. And let's not forget, mowers, they emit far more harmful pollution than cars do because they're not regulated by the EPA. We have billions of hours invested in mowing lawns and spraying products on them, and billions of tons of fertilizers and all this damage. It's just a whole giant mess of work and effort and money. And guess what? Only 10% of Americans actually spend time in their lawns. It's crazy. If ever we had a backwards system, this is the one. So I would suggest we can turn the whole thing on its head and we can replace lawns with native meadows. The twist I want to add today, though, you've probably heard about this from the standpoint of using plugs. Plugs are little plants you buy and you put them in the ground. And plugs will work for 1,000 square feet. But if you want to think about doing a whole yard, or you want to do a park, or you want to scale out and do 127,000 acres in whatever county you live in, plugs are not going to work. You're going to have to work with seed. Seed is fantastic. With seed, as long as you understand the technique, and it's not super complicated. I'm not going to get into all the details here today. My book goes through all of it. But as long as you understand the technique, it's really quite manageable. You can do large areas of conversion, and you can do it with the same tools and techniques you would do for normal lawn care. I'll walk you through the high level. Actually, let me pivot first. I want to show you this root system. So, one of my arguments for native meadows has to do with this this graphic right here. I want to direct you first to the left, where we see what appears to be a little fuzzy caterpillar. That is turf grass with its tiny little roots, barely goes an inch down. I would encourage you to go outside and dig a hole in your turf grass and look at the roots. How deep do they go? You can only build life in the soil to the depth at which the roots extend, because we know that roots are the interface between trees, and this is where life happens in the soil. So if we want to build rich soil that holds lots of carbon, that holds lots of water, and holds lots of life, we need deep roots. Our native plants have these deep roots. Look at the difference in these root systems compared to that turf grass there. That's monumental. We are doing so much good for helping heal Earth simply by having these deep roots. And then on the above ground portion, well, we are feeding endless life. It's just fantastic. The amount of life that is supported by goldenrod is incredible. Doug Tallamy does an awesome piece about all the life that comes from goldenrod, and we could just start talking about all the individual plants. They do a lot more work than turf grass. Here's a nice graphic. This is a recreation of a graphic that Xerxes made. I know everybody here is familiar with Xerxes, just a fantastic organization. But look at this food web from native plants versus this food web from lawns. It's just remarkable. It's such a difference. And of course, we're only going out 3 circles. When you start going out further and further, it expounds quickly. So more reasons why we need these systems. So to begin, you have to kill the existing vegetation. In some cases, you're going to be able to use things like solarization or what's called occultation, that's smothering the plants, preventing them from getting sunlight. But I am here to tell you that in many situations, you're going to have to use an herbicide. It's just the bottom line. We know this from experience. We've worked on hundreds of sites. You get into Bermuda grass, you get into aggressive clover, there are very few options available. We've got a whole article linked from the book about the most responsible, least damaging ways to use an herbicide. And it really is unfortunate. It's hard. It's a hard thing, but sometimes you got to take a step backward to take 10 steps forward. I also want to point out here this sign. I mentioned the signs earlier. These are so important. Neighbors used to get really upset when we started our projects. What are y'all doing? Why does it look like this? What's happening? Blah, blah, blah. You know, the normal things that happen when there's confusion and change. Well, we found that if we simply put up a sign like this one, and it has a QR code that people can click, and then takes them to an article where they can learn, that really changes things a lot. Now this goes from being a point of contention with the neighbors to being this thing that the neighbors want to learn about. It becomes the talking point. People are excited about it. Once you've killed the area, you have to sow the seeds. And normally after you sow the seeds, you're going to want to put some kind of erosion control on top. You could use straw. We actually like to use blankets of jute and straw that are woven together. It's easier to work with, and you can scale it across large spaces. And then during the first year, you're going to start getting growth like you see here on the bottom of the screen. So top of the screen was Bermuda grass before we began. Bottom of the screen is the first growing season, already looking gorgeous. Unfortunately, we don't get to keep that. One of the important parts about establishing a native meadow from seed is that you must mow it every 2 weeks during year 1 and year 2. That is the part that people get wrong. This is why most of systems from seed fail, is because it's not being mowed every 2 weeks during the first 2 growing seasons. Why? Well, number one, that mowing cycle keeps your annual weeds from going to seed. And number two, that mowing cycle ensures that our young seeds get lots of sunlight. And our native plants spend most of their first several years putting down roots, not growing up. So we need them to be getting lots of sunlight. The beautiful thing is that by year 3, well, they've now got a very powerful root system in place, and that sets the stage for explosive growth above ground. Once that happens, these systems are very resilient. They can crowd out most competing weeds. And because we've planted from seed, the density is incredible. This is my house, actually. I love this space. I showed you a few other shots from some other projects. One of the things that's probably just the best part about this work is when you get to this stage right here, you only have to cut once a year. I live on a 1/4 acre lot. My whole lot is all native trees and native meadows. And I spend maybe 8 hours a year doing yard work. 10 or 12 years ago, when I had a lawn, I would spend 8 hours in 2 weeks just mowing and doing all the things that I had to do. So massive, massive time savings. And then when we go back to resources, these systems should not be irrigated. They should not be fertilized. Nope, you should not use any products. So we're eliminating all products. We're eliminating all irrigation. We're dramatically reducing our workload. And to get here, we didn't really have to do much more than we would do for grass anyway. Mowing 2 weeks is pretty standard for a lawn. So to me, this is just a really huge win. And those are just talking about money and resources. For me, the actual win is the life. And the things I see in my yard, it's just amazing. There's so much life flocking to these spaces. It brings me joy. All right, the second, more complicated system that I want to introduce you to is something called a pocket forest. And with this is a thicket. These are the same things, just different plant selection. To set the stage for this one, I want to remind you of that tree we looked at earlier. It had the nice big mulch bed that went all the way out to the edge of the canopy. That space has to be maintained. There's a lot of money invested every year in managing the beds around trees. You're adding mulch, you're pulling weeds, and probably for most neighborhoods, not pulling weeds. It's actually probably poison being sprayed every single week. So while I would recommend that we do use herbicide for some ecological restoration projects, I absolutely would not want to use it for recurring maintenance or for food production. These are definite no-nos. If we're having to spray herbicide around a tree every year, something's wrong. I'm going to show you an alternative here. Then there's all kinds of other stuff that people often do, edging and a whole host of things. Whenever we're working with a community, an HOA, there's often a very large budget line item just for bed maintenance. Well, this system that I'm about to show you, this pocket forest, turns that whole idea on its head. And it's this idea that, hey, rather than planting one big tree in I don't know, in 100 square feet or 1,000 square feet, how about we just load that area up with young saplings? And the cool part is you're not going to spend any more money. 100 saplings might only cost you $300. Two containerized trees will cost you $300. And you're not going to spend any more time planting these systems because you can put 40 saplings in the ground per hour. So we're not spending any more money, we're not spending any more time, and instead we're able to load up an area with native saplings, and then they will grow up and we will have the maximum amount of native diversity above ground and below ground. You really can't do much more ecological restoration than this. This is about as good as it gets in terms of life. And I want to kind of show you what we do. So this is a project we're working on. We put the saplings in. Back then, we used to use these flags. Now we use markers. They're like, I think they're called driveway markers. We like them better. They're taller. They're reusable. Notice that we did put down a nice thick layer of wood chips to begin. That helps reduce the weeds before we start. That's important. We want to give the saplings a head start. For a couple of years, we're going to have to maintain this. No more maintenance than we would have to do for an existing status quo situation, you know, like that tree I was showing you earlier. It's pulling weeds, it's not replenishing mulch, but it's just kind of keeping an eye on things. And what we're attempting to do is we're wanting to get to the point where these trees grow up and close their canopy. Once there's shade and the canopy is closed, well, now it's really hard for anything to compete underneath. And believe it or not, that happens very fast, 2 to 3 years typically. And that's because when you grow lots of trees together, they grow much faster. It is not surprising because trees evolved from community. They don't grow by themselves. Trees grow in groups. So where there are multiple species, they begin sharing nutrients and they begin helping each other. It's that idea that a rising tide lifts all boats. And this is definitely the case with a pocket forest. I want to show, one other thing I also like to note, again, for you land managers out there, you folks who work with municipalities, or maybe you own a landscaping business, the beauty of this system is that you can send a group in to maintain the space. And since there are markers, they don't have to be able to identify the young saplings. All you say is, hey, just don't do anything to the plants that have markers on them. So now, much like the meadows, which require standard landscaping tools and techniques, we can send in teams to care for these spaces without them having to be horticultural experts. That's so important. If you haven't worked with municipal level or community level, this isn't going to make any sense to you. But for those of you who've worked on big scale, this is a really crucial thing to know. These systems are massively scalable at a great cost, and they can be done using people without deep knowledge of plants. All right. This is a site. So this site, the trees were planted, they were this small, little pencil saplings. This is 5 months later. Already some of these trees are 6 feet tall, which is wild. Okay, I've got a camera set up on a post. So what I'm about to show you next is the same exact spot. The camera doesn't move at all. 16 months old. This is the next growing season. Have not moved the camera. 28 months old. This is the third growing season. Canopies fully closed. There are trees in here that are 30 feet tall in 3 growing seasons. Not even. It's actually 2.5 growing seasons. It is remarkable how these systems explode with life. I cannot tell you how much I love a pocket forest. We can use the same concepts to plant a thicket. Let me tell you why we need thickets. There is a lot of energy focused on privacy hedges, and typically these privacy hedges are rows of non-native plants that are prone to disease. It occupies so much time and attention in suburban USA. Planting these these monocrops of non-native plants, caring for them, replacing them. It's a huge waste. And these systems feed nothing. They do little for soil formation, some of course, but not as much as native plants will. The thicket turns all this on its head and says, hey, rather than using one species and planting a nice neat row, let's do a buffer and load it with native shrubs that only reach a certain height. So in this system you're looking at right now, this is exactly what we've got going on. This is a privacy thicket between two neighbors. We laid down wood chips. We planted sapling, pencil-sized saplings. They're all shrub species, so they're not going to grow more than about 20, 25 feet tall. And some are evergreen, some are not evergreen. Doesn't matter because the density of plants will get so thick that even in the dormant season, there will be privacy. Let me show you the progression. These are 5 months old. Same as that other one I just showed you. Started off as pencil-sized saplings, 5 months in. Again, I have a picture post set up here. The camera's not going to move. Here we are, 16 months old. Lots of growth happening. On the left, you can actually see a native meadow that's also been planted. And I really am a big fan of putting your native meadows next to your pocket forests and thickets. They blend together very beautifully. You can cover, well, I'm not going to keep saying the same thing, but you can cover very large areas with these systems. And then here we are, third growing season, privacy thicket fully in place. You can actually see all the birds coming in because unlike the trees, these shrubs stay a little shorter. And we intentionally wove in some food for the client, blueberries, plums, etc. So not only is it a place for life, and not only have we achieved privacy, but we've also got this lovely situation where now neighbors can enjoy food and they can meet each other. All right, last but not least, I want to leave you with just one bonus idea. So far, you've already learned some great ways that you can help heal Earth and save time and money. Some are easy, some are more complicated. But for those of you who want to go even further, I want to share a really fun idea with how you can engage your community to help heal Earth. This is based on our nonprofit, Project Panda. At Project Panda, our whole goal is to connect people with trees. And the way that we do that is we engage our community to collect native seeds. So we hold tree idea events and seed collection events, and we work with people who know their plants and don't know their plants and have this really fantastic stream of native seeds coming in from the community. And then we work with the same folks to actually plant these young seeds, turn them into trees that we give away for free for ecological restoration. The reason this came about is a lot of our tree planting nonprofits here where I live have to spend a lot of money on buying trees, and they don't have a great big budget. So that's very valuable resources that they need to do other things. This is where we come in. We can provide those tree planting nonprofits with free trees, and best of all, we actually get to engage with community to collect the seeds, raise the trees. And what we have found over the years is that simply interacting with the seeds and seeing these young trees grow up, it helps change hearts and minds. So it's really a win-win-win. We're changing hearts and minds, we're helping the nonprofits, and we're helping heal Earth. The blueprint for this nonprofit is section 5 of the book, so I'll skip all the details. If this is interesting to you, you can do it by yourself. You can do it with your community. You can do it with your friends. You can do it with your local Wild Ones chapter. I'd strongly recommend that. And it's just going to be a whole lot of fun. We build boxes. These are called air pruning boxes. I'm not going to get into too much detail about why they're so remarkable, but let me show you. This is us processing seeds. We can put lots of seeds in these boxes. Just fill the whole thing. These boxes will easily grow 500 to 700 trees. And the best part is that when they come out, they have perfect root systems. And that's to do with this mesh. There's a mesh on the bottom of those boxes such that once the roots grow down, they hit the mesh and encounter air. Well, then they stop growing, and instead they grow lateral roots, and it produces a beautiful young sapling. The saplings I showed you all the way at the beginning of this deck came from these air pruning boxes. They're easy to make, they're cheap to make. You can grow hundreds of trees. And here at Project Panda, we're now growing about 150 different native species of trees and shrubs. We're producing close to 10,000 trees and shrubs per year. We're able to provide our North Carolina Wildlife Federation with plant material. They do stream bank restoration. We give plants to our local municipalities. We just give away plants for all kinds of fantastic ecological restoration projects. It's fun and it's useful. So, in closing, the idea here is we can save time and money, we can find joy, and we can help heal Earth. I really appreciate your time today, and I look forward to hearing some questions. Always my favorite part of the presentation.
Great information, which actually gives me some actionable steps to help heal my own local ecosystem. We've had so many great questions come in from the audience, everything from practical planting challenges to big picture design philosophy. So let's look at a few of those now. Our first question comes from Carol. She asks, people often ask what to add to their landscapes. What is something you regularly advise people to stop doing that feels emotionally or culturally hard for them to let go of?
That's a great question. Thank you, Carol. I'll give you two good ones. Leaving the leaves. There's so much status quo around this idea that you need to clean up your yard and remove those leaves. It really is the opposite. Leaving leaves promotes so much life. It saves you all that hassle and all that work, and it's going to make everything on your property healthier. It could directly benefit a tree, or it could indirectly benefit all your flowers by by hosting lots of life that will live in the leaves. Moths need those leaves to overwinter. They're going to then grow up and go out and pollinate your plants. So lots of reasons to leave the leaves. And then the other one I would point to, just as fast, easy answer to this, would be fertilizers. People feel obliged to use fertilizers. It's a very powerful part of our status quo. And I would just encourage you, just get off the fertilizers. Save yourself all that mess. Either do nothing or use a compost.
Our next question is pretty universal for folks in the early stages of their native plant journey. But many people feel pressure to do everything at once when they start changing their landscape. How do you help people prioritize that so that early efforts build momentum?
This is a great question. Thank you, Kevin. I find that it's a bit personality driven. I think it just sort of depends on the person. If you're somebody like me, you love to just jump in the deep end. So other people would rather move a little more slowly. So if you're going to move a little more slowly, I think the easiest, best way to start is just simply plant a sapling. Watch it grow. Look at the life that comes to that sapling. That alone can be a transformational journey. And I'm speaking from experience. You got to remember, when I got in the tree service industry, I didn't know the first thing about trees. I was motivated by money. I wanted to be rich. We cut down trees to make a profit. But working directly with trees over decades really changed my perspective. And now it's amazing. So I would say plant one sapling, watch it grow. And from there, you can expand, maybe plant some native flowers. Maybe you don't want to give up your whole yard. Well, just give up a corner of the yard. There's so many, Rebecca McMacken always talks about this idea of using rugs. You don't have to fill the whole room. Just put a nice rug down. Well, this is a great concept with native plants as well. You don't have to do it all. Just start somewhere.
And our last question, what is a question you wish people would ask you more often about caring for land, but they rarely do?
That is a great question, Laura. I don't think I've ever heard that one before. I think the question I wish people asked more is, what can I stop doing? Not what can I start doing? So much of our landscape management is too much busyness. It's doing things for the sake of doing things. You think you're supposed to do it, or I should do it, or I would do it. It's status quo. I'm not saying that this is a bad thing. We don't know any better necessarily, but really simply asking what you can stop doing is a really fun place to begin. And it opens up a whole new way of thinking about things. And it's probably going to save you time and money. And I hate to keep saying that, but I do want to throw in that hook, because I find that if we don't have, we need incentives to convince our neighbors who don't know much about plants about why this is a good thing. And in our experience here at Leaf and Limb, and we're working with tens of thousands of clients, the truth of the matter is that most people don't care about these issues. They don't care about birds and butterflies. They don't care about the things that we care about here at Wild Ones. But If you can give them a hook of save time and money, well, now you might get them interested. And if you get them interested, and then they get that sapling or they get that native butterfly milkweed, and now they see a monarch butterfly, well, all of a sudden, now they're on their own personal journey. Maybe their paradigms will shift. Maybe their heart and mind will shift. That was the case for me. And before you know it, the hook of time and money might produce a full-fledged environmentalist in a couple of years.
On behalf of Wild Ones, thank you for being part of this conversation and for everything you do to support native plants and natural landscapes. It's been great to speak with you, Basil, and we look forward to doing this again soon.
Thank you so much for having me. It was just an honor to be here.